Round 10 saw the clash of the top two players in the tournament standings. Fabiano Caruana with 6 points against Mamedyarov with 5.5. Of course, it's their second game of the tournament. This time Mamedyarov has the white pieces, and if he could beat Caruana, then he would leap into the lead. So he started with his customary d4 and solid d5 from Fabiano, and we have a Catalan. And here, of course, there are so many ways that Black can play against the Catalan. If Black wants a more complex game, then you can check on b4, and after bishop d2, go back to e7. That keeps the position more closed for the time being. But Fabiano just took on c4, and this leads to more forcing variations. And I think that suits Caruana because it's easier to prepare those kind of systems which are more forcing. And again, bishop e7 is possible, and that leads you into the main line. But knight c6 is, well, it's sharper actually. But again, you can prepare this better. And here, the most popular move in the position is queen a4, of course, with the idea of recovering the pawn on c4 very quickly. But that leads to a very, well, seemingly very complex variation like this. This is just the start of some extraordinary complications, but actually it's been very well worked out, and I'm sure that Fabiano would have been extremely well versed in that variation. So instead of that, Mamedyarov castled. Of course, it's a very normal move. And rook b8, preparing, if necessary, to support the pawn with b5. And here you can play knight c3, and then b5, and it's more of a gambit continuation. But e3 is more solid, with the idea of bringing the queen to e2 and taking the pawn on c4. Bishop e7. And now queen e2 could lead to quite a complex situation. White can gambit a pawn here. And, I mean, White obviously has compensation. He has this pawn in the middle of the board, and potentially there are weaknesses on these files. I'm sure that Fabiano would have been ready for that. But instead, Mamedyarov played knight fd2. So wanting to take the pawn. So if Black just plays a normal move like castles, then in this situation White is slightly better. Well, I would say even a very pleasant position for White, because this bishop is wonderful, and it's hard to bring this bishop into the game. So Black has to react quickly here, but Fabiano did that with e5, and this is an excellent move, breaking out while White is consuming quite a lot of time spinning this knight around. So, you know, if this is taken, then this already just frees Black's position. So Mamedyarov played bishop takes knight. That's recaptured, and then he played in the principled way. He took another pawn, or took a pawn, I should say. I mean, if White doesn't do this, if you take on c4, then, I mean, Black is absolutely fine, as White has just given up this light square bishop. So d takes e5, hitting the knight, and the knight comes to g4. So obviously Black wants to take here, so knight takes c4. And, well, I mean, this has been played a few times before. It's not very well known, but clearly Caruana was ready for this position. And he played bishop e6, hitting that knight. And it's a little bit awkward, actually. Obviously, if Black can eliminate this and then take here, then he's doing absolutely fine. You can see that Black's development is very, very good in this position compared to White. You know, these pieces still on the back rank. So Mamedyarov played knight d2. If you trade, this has been played before. If you trade queens, then, well, this doesn't really get you anywhere at all. white is really bound up here, and black is going to recover this pawn easily. So anyway, Mamedyarov played knight d2, but you can see that this bishop is locked in, and it's going to take some time for white to unravel here. And Caruana now played an excellent move, h5, which threatens just to take the initiative. So for example, if white plays the obvious developing move on the queen side, b3, and then bishop b2, after h4, this attack is already extremely strong, and you know that queen could easily find its way over to the h file. So Mamedyarov had to react. He played f3. Now, retreating the knight would just lose the initiative. So queen d3. And now we've got a liquidation on our hands because, of course, black is ready to take here and also the pawn on e3. So pawn takes knight and bishop takes knight. And knight takes bishop. So in this way, white at least manages to clear some wood from the board, and after pawn takes pawn, closes the h-file as well. But what a messy position we've got on the board. If we do a quick count up, we'll see that white has 7 pawns still against black's 5. So white is 2 pawns up, but his pawns are really horrible. And this bishop still has to come into the game, and that means this rook takes some time to come into the game, whereas black's pieces are very well placed, very active indeed. So, I mean, I think there's more than one way to play this, but Caruana played in, well, a very solid way, a very sensible way. And the threat is just to play queen takes pawn. And also, I suppose you could say it preempts b3 as well. Queen f3 from Mamedyarov. It's interesting, at this stage it was clear that Mamedyarov was not really very familiar with this whole line, whereas Caruana was playing very quickly indeed. So queen f3 at least keeps an eye on these pawns and prevents queen takes pawn. But rook b5, and the rook is ready to swing over and take on e5. And here, for example, if white gets greedy and tries to keep some pawns or just develop this bishop quickly, then rook takes, and now if g4, hoping to hang on to a pawn, then rook g5, hitting this one and also threatening rook h5 as well. So it's not so easy to hang on to these extra pawns. But queen a5. So Mamedyarov really taking no chances here. He just wants to get to an endgame. So Caruana has 1 pawn back and still has a very active position. Rook f5. I mean, it's a bizarre pawn structure with these double pawns here and isolated pawn here. I know these pawns are split, but it's all about the activity of the pieces. And somehow with rooks and bishops, this increases the chances of a draw. With knights on the board, that's trickier. But with bishops, particularly the same coloured bishops, often it will liquidate into perhaps a rook and pawn ending where one side might be a pawn up, but it'll be a draw anyway. All right, so what does black do? Rook d6, good move, preventing bishop d2, and also preparing to bring this one down here. King g2 and rook d1. Of course, at any stage, white can just bring the rook back and trade off and give a pawn back, but I mean, white certainly isn't worse, certainly isn't better in those positions. b3. And then came g6. So this is just clearing up the situation, actually. It's going to bring this rook into the game too. And now sneaky move, rook e5. Sometimes with the idea of playing rook takes bishop and then bishop a3. And in fact, I think, you know, if Caruana had wanted to make a draw straight away. He could have allowed this. He could have played rook takes h5, and after rook takes bishop, king takes, there's a check. Now this does not win the rook because the rook drops back to d6, and I think we've got a drawn rook and pawn endgame on our hands after this. I don't see either side has any particular claim to the advantage in this position, so finally pawns are actually level. But it's interesting, Caruana clearly wanted to keep some play in the position. He played c5, so obviously ruling out that idea with rook e7. Mamedyarov took, he's still a pawn up, and then played e4. Now once again, rook takes bishop is a threat, but this is a serious threat. Rook takes bishop, bishop g5, winning the rook. So therefore rook h7 played, so you can just recapture with the rook. And rook f7. So black is really getting very active with the rooks, and remember, if bishop b2, then rook d2 check will win a piece. So king h3 and rook f1. So this is why Caruana was playing on. He can win material here. However, after this, white is only the exchange down, and at this point he has two pawns and a bishop against a rook. So actually it's a very level position. I think both sides were trying something here, but the position is too dry. Too many pawns have been exchanged, and I think the thing is, if white can stabilize here, then there could be a faint chance of playing for a win. But the thing is, the rooks are so active that it's really impossible to make progress. And they played on for another 20 odd moves and finally liquidated into a drawn rook and pawn endgame, and then even liquidated into king against king. So well fought, finished on the 58th move. But somehow one felt that once they'd arrived at this endgame after move 19, you felt like a draw was on the card. So interesting, Mamedyarov didn't risk everything in this game. He realized that, well, it would have been very risky to go into Caruana's opening preparation in some of the sharper lines, and he kept it pretty tight there. So that means that after 10 rounds, Caruana has 6.5 points, Mamedyarov 6, Grishuk 5.5, Karyakin and Ding 5 points. If you want to see the most interesting game of round 10, then do click through at the end of this video to see Kramnik against Aronian, the battle of the two wounded beasts at the bottom of the tournament table, because they produced something really remarkable today, and I am going through that game as well. So watch out for that. Don't miss it. It's really amazing. Don't forget to like and comment the videos, and as I said, do check out the Kramnik Aronian vid. Thanks.